All right, we're here to talk about service purchases for police officers' retirement system. First, I'd like to introduce myself and give a welcome to the team here. So I'm Brad Baker. I'm the Deputy Director for the Fairfax County Retirement Systems. And I'd also like to, before I introduce my team and Chiron, who's here to explain the calculation, I'd like to give a thank you quickly to Deputy Chief Kraus and Second Lieutenant Barron for the help organizing this, getting some information out to you on BlueNet, et cetera. So that communication has hopefully helped get some information out to you, and hopefully this event will provide a lot more information, answer all your questions. Additionally, thank you to Steve Monahan and the PBA for facilitating some of the questions. We received a lot of feedback, as there are a lot of complexities to the service purchase information. So thank you for Steve and his team for that. On each of your tables in front of you, and there's a lot more towards the front of the room. So if anybody needs any documentation, I see the first two rows are mostly empty, but there is a agenda which provides a background on the service purchase, how it came to be. I'm not going to go through that word by word or anything like that, but it is there for people that are not too familiar with how the service purchase came to be. Additionally, you'll see a agenda outline. So hopefully we'll stick within those timeframes. This is a 2-hour event, and then we have a break because then we have another presentation for the uniformed retirement system. So we'll try to keep it on track. There's also frequently asked questions. So we have 33 frequently asked questions that pertain specifically to the police officers' retirement system and the service purchases for the system. There's also going to be some actuarial tables in there for those of you that actually want to look into the actuarial calculation information. We're not going to dive into that too much unless there are specific questions that are brought during the presentation, but it is there in case anybody wants to take that and try to do a personal calculation themselves. Lastly, there's the actual application for a service purchase. So if anybody's looking to do a service purchase, you have a form available for you there. The retirement systems won't be handling that paperwork until the Board of Supervisors approves an amendment to the ordinance, which actually allows us to process service purchases as they were negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement. That is tentatively supposed to be that meeting for the Board of Supervisors for that approval of the ordinance amendment is going to be on May 21st. And barring any surprises, that it's expected to be passed at that point in time. At that time, we can officially start processing applications, submitting or preparing estimates, statements for the costs associated with that for anybody. So hopefully we have all the information available here. So if anybody wants to take it home, submit it in a few weeks, then make it slightly easier. In addition to recording this event, we're going to have all the documentation and the recordings are going to be available on our website. And there's a link in the frequently asked questions. There's that information is also in the PowerPoint slide you'll see later. That website for anybody that's interested. And Amy, if you can type this into the chat, just so anybody online can access it in the future as well. It's going to be fairfaxcounty.gov/retirement/news-0. So we will be uploading information from this presentation to that website by the end of this week. Most likely the recording will be the last thing that we have to get up there. But right now there's nothing there, just so you know. If you go there, there's material to be forthcoming. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce the team here with me. I'll start from my left. We have standing here Larry Little. He's our senior retirement analyst, and to his right is Stephanie Davis, who's also a retirement analyst. So if any of you have ever contacted us, you very most likely dealt with one of them regarding anything service related or even benefit calculation wise. Amy Bain is going to be moderating our online information. If there are any questions that come up, if you're online, please type them into the chat. Amy will be gathering those questions and presenting them at one of our 2 Q&A sessions. And to my right is Coralie Taylor. She is one of our 2 consulting actuaries. The other one is Fiona Liston, who's online with us. So she'll be presenting information regarding the actuarial calculation of the service purchase cost. All right, just a quick rundown on the agenda. So after I speak, Coralie will present the service purchase information, and then we'll have questions at the end associated with that specific information. If you have any actuarial questions, any cost calculation questions, please bring them up at that time. We'll get into, after we have that Q&A session, which we've set aside for 30 minutes for it, then we'll go into Fairfax County Retirement System staff discussing how to go through a request for a service purchase, information associated with the forms, some verification documents, some general information there. And then we'll have another 30-minute Q&A at the end. So hopefully that'll be enough time that you can answer all the questions. But if you can hold questions, those 2 specific Q&A sessions, I appreciate it. All right, and if you're looking at the frequently asked question document in person, I'm sorry, I don't know if you have it online or not. It generally aligns with how this presentation is going. So general questions align with what I'm talking about now. Now I'll look into covering some of those at the moment. And then as you go through, they're synced up to the presentations. So hopefully the information is all consistent. Quickly, I'll address who can do a service purchase, and that is for active members of this system. So everybody that's a part of the police officers retirement system that's an active member. Active member specifically refers to anybody that's not already entered drop or otherwise retired. You have to be a sworn officer, of course, to be eligible for a service purchase under this retirement system. One question that I just wanted to touch off base, and this is actually part of the requirements when this benefit was negotiated, is this needs to be a cost neutral to the plan. So there cannot be any benefit or negative side effect to having a service purchase with this retirement system. So the cost associated with it, it's supposed to specifically handle the cost to the system, the actuarially assumed cost of the system. So there's no benefit to the system because we're doing service purchases. If everybody made a service purchase, the system does not, have more money, is in a better position financially, and vice versa. If nobody does a service purchase, it's not going to hurt the fund. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it off to Coralie, and she is going to go over our calculated cost for service purchase.
Hi, I'm Coralie Taylor, and I am, and with me on Teams right now is Fiona Liston, and we're the actuaries for the Fairfax Retirement Systems. And we're here today to go kind of into detail on the actual calculation of the service purchase if you were to choose to receive an estimate or actually go through and do a full purchase of your service. So before we get into the details of the calculation, I just wanted to talk about the types of service purchase that are currently available to you. There is an option that if you're in a plan in one of the Fairfax retirement systems, that you are able to transfer your service to another plan. And in that case, your service under the plans has already been taken into account. We know how much service you have. The county has been funding anticipated retirement benefits on your behalf. So when you transfer from one plan to the other, the cost is only related to the contributions that you have made into the plan because the plan has been funded by the county. The other type of purchase is when you are purchasing service from outside of the Fairfax system. And in that case, as Brad mentioned earlier, you need to fund the entire cost of the service purchase, so that the plans are not left in a better or worse situation than they would have been absent the purchase of the service. This is very similar to the portability from VRS that most of you are probably aware of. So that's how this calculation that I'm showing today is going to be handled. So next slide. I think Brad talked about the required change to the ordinance that would allow for this service purchase and what kind of service that you would be able to purchase and contribute to your benefit under this plan. When you go through and make a purchase of service, you're basically doing two things. So first off, you are increasing the number of years of service that you're getting in your ultimate retirement benefit when you reach retirement age. So if you were, say, to purchase 3 years of service, then once you reach your retirement age, you have an additional 3 years tacked on to the calculation of the benefit that you'll ultimately receive for your lifetime. The other thing that the service purchase does is actually goes into your eligibility for receiving said retirement benefit. So if you need the 25 years of service, which in this plan is typically the case, you need 25 years of service to receive a retirement benefit, you now are purchasing service to go towards that eligibility to retire. And as mentioned previously, you would be responsible to fund the cost of the entire amount of the additional 4 years of service. Oh, next slide. So when we do these calculations, and they're very complex, and they require you to look, or us to look at what your benefit would be at your retirement age, assuming you have the service without any service purchase, and then you look at the benefit of at your anticipated retirement age if you actually purchased those additional years of service. And we discount all that back to today and say, okay, what's the difference between those two possible benefits? And that's the cost to purchase the service. So in order to do that, if we're standing here today, we don't actually know what your retirement benefit will be at your retirement age. I mean, you may not retire at your earliest eligibility, but we have to make a number of assumptions in order to come up with some kind of a cost for this purchase. So some of the main assumptions that we use for that are that we assume that you retire when you're first eligible. And typically that's about 25 years. We assume that your salary today is going to be receive salaries increases of 2.25% per year. And when we discount the value of your benefits back to today, we are using a 6.75% interest rate, which is in line with the investment returns that we assume for performing our actuarial valuations every year. We are using the mortality that was adopted by the Board of Trustees at the last experience study, which I believe was in 2020. And we assume that once you start your benefits, you're going to receive a cost of living assumption in the amount of 2.1%. Some years it's going to be larger than that, and recently it definitely has been. Some years it's lower than that. This is the assumption that we use for purposes of the calculation at the moment. All right, moving on to the steps. So for any of you who actually want to go through and calculate this for yourselves, these are the steps you're going to take. So as I mentioned, We need to determine what we expect the normal retirement benefits to be with and without the normal the service purchase. So in order to do that, we project out the anticipated years of service. We assume that you earn an additional year of service every year until you ultimately retire. Then we project out the salary using that 2.25% assumption that I mentioned earlier. We convert that salary into a final average salary, and you're probably aware that I think you call it a 78 pay period, 36 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. 36-month salary. So we calculate what we anticipate the final average salary to be, and then we put all of those together with the multiplier of 2.8% and come up with what the projected normal retirement benefit would be with and without the service purchase. We discount both those back using a present value factor, and the difference is the cost to you. So now I'm going to go into a few sample calculations to hopefully, and for anyone that is not able to see the slides, I apologize now because it's very number heavy, but I will try to describe them so that you're able to follow along. But the sample calculation that we're looking at, the calculator that Stephanie uses in determining these costs does take into account all of the plan provisions for each of the plans in the police officer's retirement system. But for purposes of this calculation, we're going to assume the member is currently in Plan C. And this participant they are newly hired, fresh, ready to go. They're 25 years old. They have no service, and they are entering the plan with a base salary of $100,000. Next slide. So here's where the numbers really come into play, but I will try to describe them. So as I said before, they're 25 years old. They have no service. We are going to assume for this estimate that they're purchasing the maximum amount of service of 4 years or 48 months. So in this case, as I mentioned earlier, they need 25 years of service to retire. So they will be without service purchase 50 when they're eligible to retire, they're first eligible. And that would translate to 25 years of service worked. Then we project out the salary, the starting salary of 100,000 with 2.25% annual increases, which ultimately lands them with a final salary in the year prior to their retirement of 174,000. Then we'd have to do a slight conversion to come up with that 36-month average that goes into the calculation of the benefit, which is 170,605. Using the 2.8% multiplier, the 25 years of service, and the final average salary of 170,000, we come up with a projected annual retirement benefit of 119,000, which would be paid every year. And then we discount that back using a present value factor. And in this case, the factor is 3.2247 for a present value of 385,000 when you're standing here, today in 2024. That's the present value of the benefits. When you add in or purchase 4 years of service, you end up, again, we assume you retire at your earliest eligibility. So you're going to have the 25 years of service, but in this case, you're going to be able to retire 4 years earlier. So you are sitting there at 46 with a full retirement benefit. So what does that mean for the calculation? Well, your salary is not going to grow as much as what it would have grown without any service purchase. Why? you're eligible to retire 4 years earlier. So you have 4 fewer years of assumed salary increases at that 2.25%. So the final average salary under that scenario is 156,000, with the projected benefit being 109,000, which is slightly lower than under the no service option. However, the present value, it ends up being higher than under the no service option because you're eligible to retire 4 years earlier. So you're 4 years closer to retirement than you would have been. So the present value factor is 4.4197 under this case, and the present value is 483,000 approximately. So take the difference between the two values showing up in number 6 there, and the cost of purchase comes out to 97,772. And we wanted to translate that to a cost as a percentage of the salary that they're receiving today, and that amount would be about 98%. So it's quite a big number for that additional 4 years of service. I think these are just some notes that I've already spoken to on the prior slides, so I'm going to skip that. So the next example we wanted to show was, well, what happens if today you've already been working for 15 years? So if you hired in at 25, you're now 40 years old. We also assumed that the starting salary in this scenario was 100,000, but now they're 15 years out from that. They've been receiving salary increases of 2.25% for 15 years. So the starting salary in 2024 is 139,000. So in this case, they are 15 years closer to retirement than in the prior case. I'm just going to go through kind of the differences this time rather than walking through both. So you have same situation. They're purchasing 4 years of service. They are eligible to retire 4 years earlier with the service purchase. So 46 versus the 50. And they will have 25 years of service when they ultimately retire. The final average salary is identical to the first version because we've assumed that 2.25% salary projects out to the retirement age, and the projected benefit is identical. The differences here lie in that present value factor, and they have increased quite a lot from the prior example. They're now 8.6649.
Let me step in real quick.
Okay.
I think it's okay. We're trying to make sure that everybody online can see the screens that we're sharing as well.
Good.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, so we were at the present value factor. Those factors are now quite a bit higher than they were on the prior example. We have 8.6649 with no service purchase and 11.8762 if you were to purchase 4 years of service. And the present values are quite high. 1,034,000 without any service purchase and almost 1.3 million with 4 years of service purchased. And so the difference between those has grown substantially from the prior example. It's almost 263,000. It's quite a valuable benefit. And so when we look at that as a cost of the salary as of today, that is 188% of the salary. And so Now I wanted to quickly dive into the present value factors because that can be quite a confusing concept and um, kind of hard to understand. So as I mentioned earlier, these are developed with the assumptions that we have um, been using with the last experience study that we performed and that were adopted by the board. And it reflects well, okay, so when you retire, we assume you're going to get X benefit. And then a year later, we assume, well, you're going to get a cost of living adjustment of 2.1%. There's also a probability that you might not survive the year. So we have to take into account the probability that you will still be around to receive said benefit. And then we continue that projection all the way down. Then we have to take all those payments and discount them back. And it's quite a complicated process. So we thought that it would be helpful to show um, a simplified example in the form of a bank account. So if you have a bank account and you want to be able to pull out some sum of money at a date out in the future, if you're putting a single deposit in at say 25, you're expecting the balance of that amount to grow with time to some date in the future, say 50. But if you were to put in an amount at say 40, you have 15 fewer years to grow that account balance. And so the amount you have to put in at 40 is quite a bit higher than the amount that you put in at 25 because it has less time to grow. So that's kind of the concept of present value and why the factors are much larger the closer you are to the anticipated retirement date. Clear as mud? All right, so this is the final example that we wanted to go through, and this is someone that standing here today, they are already eligible to retire. They've received the 25 years of service. They are still actively employed, but they would like to make that service purchase. So, looking at this example, in this case, when I talked initially, slide 2 or 3. I said that there were two ways that this service purchase comes into play. One, the calculation of the retirement benefit, but also the determination of eligibility. So in this example, the determination of eligibility doesn't come into play. They are already eligible. So the differences here are in the service at retirement. They had 25 years already standing here today before the service purchase, but they want to tack on an additional 4 years of service. So they end up with 29 years of service. The salaries and the final average salary under this scenario are identical in this example, and that's because their salary is set fixed here at their earliest retirement age, which is today. The difference is in the projected benefit. In the example with the 4 years of service, they end up with a higher projected benefit because they have 4 additional years going into that benefit. And then the present value here is much larger than the prior two examples. It's 16.8562 because we're expecting them to receive a benefit today and then every year in the future going forward. So it's a high present value factor with the present value of the benefit now over 2 million in both scenarios, and the difference between the two is 322,000. So larger than the other two examples. When you look at that as a percentage of the salary today, which is that 174,000, the cost as a percentage of salary is 184%. And if you're a numbers person, you might be noticing, well, that's weird. The cost as a percentage of salary in this scenario is 184%, but the one in the example where the participant has 15 years of service and is 40 years old was 188%. What's going on? And the answer lies in that the ability to purchase eligibility for retirement. So this is, for anyone that's visual, this is a look at the cost by shown as a percentage of salary by years of service purchased. So the green line there is if you purchase 1 year of service, and then so on up to 4 years. And in the 4-year example, which is the one that I've been going through on this presentation, once they peak, once you've already accrued 21 years of service, you are buying less eligibility service as you continue working. Because at 21 years of service, if you purchase 4 years of service, you have the 25 required to retire. If you're standing there at 22 years of service, you actually don't need all 4 years to get to that 25 years. You only need 3 years. So you're buying down less of the eligibility piece, and that results in the costs as a percentage of salary kind of dropping down there. Obviously, looking at this, it's clear that this is going to be a lot cheaper for those that are early in their career, don't already have a lot of years of service under their belts. So with that said, I think we have a lot more material, but that was kind of what we wanted to get through, and we would just open it up to questions from any of you. Now it's a lot of numbers.
Yes, yeah, so when it goes live, once the Board of Supervisors approved the ordinance amendment, there's a specific website. It's probably gonna be the easiest way to get a hold of us. It's in the documentation, but it's also service purchases at fairfaxcounty.gov. And so you can submit questions. We already received an email or two since this information was distributed yesterday. So if you have any questions or you're looking for paperwork, you can communicate to us through there. You can also contact us at the main office. That information is in the presentation. And we're also at the location just about a half a mile from here. So if anybody wants to come down, we have walk-ins. You can receive additional information.
Days. That's still true, and we get a bump in between that 60 days that we quoted that number, like we have 1 month to get this sorted out, basically.
Sure.
Repeat the questions.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. And also I will answer that, but I also wanted to try to stick to the actuarial and the cost calculations, but I do appreciate that question. All right, so the question was concern about when to apply and submit documentation because you have salary increases that are going into effect in July. Officially, the salary pay period begins July 13th. So if you're looking to pursue a service purchase statement and the cost to you, you would need to get that information, paperwork to us by July 12th. The information in terms of the documentation, the forms that are necessary are going to be made available, but we will not be sending responses back until the amendment is approved by the Board of Supervisors. So you can complete paperwork, you can submit it to that email address, but do not expect us to actually respond until at least that we're allowed to. more or less. Does that answer your questions? Okay. Yes, sir. So the question for the people online is, while we're using 25 as an example, someone starting at 25, if it's, sorry, can you say the part again about if it goes up or down based on your service? Okay, so the question is, does the age of 25 have a significant impact on the cost to the purchase compared to somebody that's younger age or older age?
That's there's a lot of things that go into this calculation. So it's not just the age at which you start, it's also how many years of service that you're expected to get to ultimately get to your retirement benefit. Fiona, do you have anything else
Yeah,
to add
yeah, I'll
to
just
that?
I'll chime in as a disembodied voice here. If you were hired at an age younger than 25, then when you get to 25 years of service, you will be younger than age 50. And that means you're going to be expected to receive the benefit for a longer period of time. Just
Sorry, just to
because
sort of hone in
more
on the question. So each of the factors that is used in the calculation and the assumptions are going to change depending on each person's unique scenario. So if you have somebody that, for example, say maybe they started at 22, the cost is going to be less if they're younger. It's going to be less if you were making less in salary. It's going to be less if you have less years of service already earned in the force. So all those factors do change the overall cost to each person individually. Trying to think of any other scenario I can think of off the top of my head, but that's generally, yes, the cost is going to consistently change based on those factors. And generally in that direction. Salary in general, the older you get, the longer you've worked, you're getting promotions, getting increases. So the salary is going to increase and the cost for that purchase because your retirement benefits increasing. So I hope that answers that. Yes. Yeah, so there is a table that I have, and I started to get to it on the when I started the event. There was a matrix based on, it starts I think at age 25 and it hits every 5 years of age. Yeah. So that information will be presented. Let me see if I'll bring it up on the screen. Actually, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And this information will be available, like I said, on our website. Okay. So let's see. I see. Okay. So you're asking about different ages because this is based on if you start at age 25 with 0 years. The assumption is if you have so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years of service and based on your salary. Okay. So like the cost being if they were 30 instead is this matrix does show if it's 5 years at 75,000, does that mean 5 additional years in age 25? with 5 years of service. So there'd be 30 with 5 years of service at that $75,000 salary. I believe that's what this information is
Yes.
showing.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not inferred in the calculation, but this matrix does show you what the age is, assuming it's at 25 with 0. And if you have 5 years, it's assuming you're age 30 with 5 years of service at that point. So we don't have anything yet, but I can add something there where it shows may start at age 20, then have 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 years. Okay. Yes, absolutely. I appreciate that.
Repeat what she said.
Oh, and for the people online, the question was the matrix of the costs based on age, years of service, salary, et cetera, is an example of somebody that starts at age 25. So their request was if we could provide some information that shows somebody that actually starts at age 20 with 0 years of service as a little bit more of a data point to do a comparison. Age, yes, age matters, years of service matter. The younger you are, the farther away from your earliest retirement date. So the longer that money can accrue over time, compound over time. Sure. So the question is, once you're eligible, already eligible, say it's 55, shouldn't the cost come down? Yes. So the cost does come down. Corley was hitting on specifically once you're at 21 years, the cost no longer increases as you have seen it from 0 years of service to 21 years of service. The cost continues to increase because you're still purchasing service that counts both towards your retirement benefit calculation and towards your eligibility. After you've hit 21 years, if you're looking to purchase 4 years of service, say when you're 22 or 23 years of service in, you can still purchase that 4 years of service, but only a portion. Let's use 23 years of ages or 23 years of service as an example. So if you have 23 years of service and you can purchase 4 more years of service, 2 of those years is going to directly impact your eligibility for an early retirement or a retirement benefit right away. The other 2 years is going to be a lesser cost because you're only increasing your retirement benefit, but not your eligibility to receive that retirement benefit at an earlier age.
And clarify that that's a cost as a percentage of the salary that you're currently receiving. The total cost is going to be larger as you're closer to retirement.
The question online, what is the difference in Plan A and B as opposed to Plan C?
In general, for the calculation of service purchase, Plan C doesn't provide an additional 3% factor when calculating your retirement benefits. So Plans A and B in the retirement calculation do include an additional 3% that's calculated on top of the calculation for determining retirement benefit. So Plan C does not have it. So there should be a lesser cost for members in Plan C. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, does it make more sense for someone to wait until they already have 25 years of service or closer to 25 years of service to reduce the cost to them to purchase service? Now, it depends on what you specifically intend to do. So if you're looking to just reduce the cost and you're going to expect it to work 25 total years, and that's what your intent is to have that income pre-retirement, then it would cost you in that scenario less money. It would make more sense to you to do that. However, if you are, 21 years of service and you want to retire right away, you just want to purchase that service, start collecting a benefit. It's going to be less because you retired with less salary than you would if you waited 4 more years. So it's really individual depending on when it makes the most sense for you to purchase it. If you want the cost to be less, you can wait until you earn 25 years or 21 plus years in purchasing those 4 years of service, but it really comes down to the individual.
It will, if you're eligible for retirement, it's going to be expensive to purchase this service. If you're already eligible, it's going to be expensive. It's going to cost a lot. The cost as a percentage of salary may be lower, but it's still going to cost a lot. Those costs are going to increase up until the time that you're eligible for retirement benefit. It's going to be expensive. So if you don't, it would be wise to purchase earlier if you're able to reduce the cost that you would ultimately have to pay.
Wait until after July 1. That bump is going to be counted to its cost. Is that going to be reflected in the payout? For consecutive years in paid by it. So if I want to see the increase in my monthly check in retirement, would it be beneficial to me to wait post July 1 or 13 in order to make sure that that number is reflected? Or is it better to buy it prior to that 7/13 in order to save the money if it's not going to count towards the high 3?
All right, so the question for those online was, does it make more sense to wait until your salary increases? For example, with the salary increases that go into effect July 13th, does it make more sense to wait for that salary increase? Because even though the cost is greater, does it increase your retirement benefit more because your salary is higher? Actuarially, and I'll touch on this, but I'm not an actuary, so I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty here. But actuarially, the cost to the system, the liability to the system should be the same at whichever point in time you make that purchase. So if you make that purchase now with a lesser salary versus you make it later with a greater salary, the overall cost of the system should be the same. In terms of the actual calculation, the cost to the individual and the benefit to the individual, I think, and Corley or Fiona, please step in here, but I think that the cost actuarially should net similar amounts over your expected lifespan. Is that?
So the calculation that we perform for calculating this cost is not ultimately going to determine what your final benefit is at retirement. It's only a set of assumptions that we're using to be able to tell you, hey, how much do you need to contribute to be able to purchase an additional 4 years? When you ultimately get to retirement age, you're going to be using the actual salary that you have at retirement. You're going to be using the actual years of service. None of these assumptions that we're using here today will affect that. You're going to actually get whatever COLA is granted each July 1. So this is just for purposes of determining the cost of purchase to you today.
And I'm going to step in because I was just talking to our senior retirement analyst here who I think is clarifying what your question is actually specifically getting to in terms of actual retirement. So are you talking about if I'm somebody that's currently eligible to retire, does it make more sense for me to wait until my salary is higher and to purchase the service? And specifically, are you asking about the final average salary calculation? Okay, all right. So Okay. So the scenario is that somebody can retire. They're looking at the purchase and trying to determine if it makes sense for them to do it before the raise or after the raise. And in this scenario, they have sick leave in 2 years, which I think is plan A, right? It's capped at 1,000, or sorry, 1 year. It's capped at 1 year sick leave that you can use towards your retirement calculation for the PORS plans Plan C. So is it more beneficial to you to make a purchase now versus after the salary increases? So I'm just going to go through this a couple ways. So first of all, if you make the purchase now, it's going to be cheaper to you because the salary is less. Purchase service does not count towards your final average salary calculation. So if you purchase the service before the increase, it's cheaper for you as an individual. And in your specific case, if you're plan A, which I assume you are, you can have your full 2 years of sick leave used to calculate your final average salary. So you could work an additional year after the raises go into effect this year, and then retire with 2 years of sick leave, and your total of your final average salary will be based on those total of 3 years. But if you make the purchase before your raises go into effect, it would cost you less. So that's probably the optimal scenario for that case. Okay. Any questions online? Yes, sir. All right, so the question about the turnaround time, we'll get into that because we do have a presentation on that. So if we don't answer your specific question after the retirement team presents, please bring that question up again. Anybody else have anything cost related? Okay, all right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to a presentation from Larry and Stephanie, talking about going through a service purchase process. Okay, it should be good. All right, thank you.
Hello. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk just by to kind of explain to you all how you can request the estimate, what the process will look like if you do decide to move forward with it, who you can reach out to, and then answer any questions. It sounds like a lot of your questions are actually relating to how you can do it, not just how much it costs. So hopefully a lot of you know where we're located. We're right off of Route 50 near Fair Oaks Mall. Brad touched on this. Probably the easiest way to reach out to us to make sure that you're not just hitting up Larry or me or Brad separately is if you email us at servicepurchases@fairfaxcounty.gov. That'll make sure that somebody will get to you and answer any of those questions. That's also where you'll be able to submit the forms. Larry's going to go over kind of the intricacies of the form itself. Okay, so sorry, looking at these slides. Okay, so I think we've already covered this, who's allowed to purchase it. So from this system, you guys are actually allowed to purchase prior active duty military service, as long as you were honorably discharged. You're also allowed to purchase up to 48 months of prior law enforcement service. And so as we've discussed, that's going to increase both the calculation that we'll do for you and then, of course, eligibility. It does not help for our newer officers who are not yet vested. So you still have to hit your vesting period, and then it'll apply just like it does with sick leave, basically. Except it doesn't count towards your final average salary like sick leave does. Okay. So there's some requirements in terms of the prior active duty military service. So these are 180 plus days of consecutive service. In terms of what you need to submit, you'll see, I don't want to take over what you're going to talk about. So we're going to come back to this when we look at the form. We're going to go through this piece in detail in terms of the forms that should be in front of you, that you're welcome to take with you as well. Switch through that. Okay, well, actually, I'm going to let you go ahead and
Do the application.
yeah.
All right. Y'all have an application. This is the application we'll be using and you'll submit to us. There's basically two choices on the application.
Do you want to talk here?
No, I'm sorry, I got to do it, right?
Mhm.
Sorry. All right. For the police officer system, it's a purchase for outside service credit. This is specifically for military or prior law enforcement service. There's two specific types that's covered under the CBA. That's under number 8. So if you have military service, we're looking for the DD 214. It specifically has to have the service that you are in. It'll have your start date, end date. We can use that information to calculate the cost for the buy-in. If you have prior law enforcement service, that's more detailed. When you go, you're going to complete the first page. The second part, the back page, is going to have to be completed by your former employer. They're certifying what service is eligible to buy into our system. You have to complete this form and return it to us through the email that she stated, and we'll calculate the cost and send it to you.
So we do need the completed application before you get it back. So if you have prior law enforcement service, it's a little bit of a longer process for you. You need to send that to your prior employer and or retirement administration so they can certify the months that you have they're eligible and that you no longer have service under those plans. So when it comes to the active duty military, you're still eligible to get a benefit from the military if you're able to. But in terms of the law enforcement, you will be required to take the money out of those plans. Okay, because you can't get credit for the same 4 years of service in multiple plans, right? So that is what they're certifying. They're certifying, yes, you have this many months, and yes, he or she is no longer eligible for a benefit. Okay. So when you submit those to us, I know we mentioned everything is going to hopefully be approved on May 21st. If you submit it beforehand, the 30-day clock in terms of how long it'll take to get it back doesn't start until it's actually approved. So if you turn it in today, it doesn't mean that you're going to get it in 30 days. You still have to give us time to process it after that date. Once we send you a contract, it'll give you the options that you have in terms of paying for it. So a little bit unique to this type of service is that you're eligible to purchase all 48 months, or you can kind of do it. I mean, you can purchase 2 years of it if you want to, 36 months, whatever. Whereas the buy-ins and buybacks that we have now, it's all or nothing. So it does not work that way in terms of the outside service purchase. So when we send you the contract, though, if they say you have 48 months that you're eligible for or 36 months, we're going to send you the cost for all of it. Okay, so it's still up to you what you would like to do in terms of if you want to purchase all of it. Maybe you only have 2 years until you're eligible to retire and you only want to buy 2 years. You have that opportunity too. So we'll send you the contract. We'll send you a letter explaining it. Then you'll decide how you'd like to pay for it. So you have 60 days where we lock in the cost. Like Coralie mentioned, the cost is directly associated with like when you're eligible to retire, what your salary history is. So if you submit the request, you know, at May 21st, we're going to use your salary before that increase. If you wait 60 days, when we go to recalculate it, it's going to be probably considerably higher with that large increase that you all are getting. So it does benefit you to do it within the 60 days. In terms of paying for it, you're allowed to spread those payments out over 4 years if you'd like. So you can do payroll deductions. So we will coordinate with your payroll contact to have biweekly deductions taken out. So it ends up being over 104 biweekly pay periods, which is quite a bit. You technically could shorten that if you wanted to, but it is quite a large cost, so it would just be dependent on what you'd like to do. They are post-tax deductions. You can pay for it as a lump sum all in full. So if you maybe wanted to use your 457 with the county and pay for all of it, you can. In terms of partial payments, you can't make partial payments throughout the payment process. So if you wanted to do part of it as a lump sum payment, you can do that only at the beginning or at the very end. So if you wanted to reduce the cost of the payments ongoing, you pay at the beginning, then we'd set up a contract for the remaining portion. Okay, so you can write a check, you can do a rollover, trustee to trustee transfer, you have some options. So also, unlike the service purchases that we currently offer, if you do not finish the contract, you will still get credit for however much you've paid for in full months. So 104 biweekly pay periods is a long time. A lot of things can happen. So if you make it through a part of it, either you decide to enter drop
or you resign, or you just don't want to pay for it anymore, you can terminate the contract at that point and you'll get credit for the whole months that you've purchased up to that time. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just see if you guys have any questions. I know we had a lot of questions coming in about it, so why don't you just fire away?
He said that. Do not fire away.
Do not fire, hypothetically speaking. So that's a different process. So if you already did a portability transfer, so we have a portability agreement with VRS. So say you've already done that transfer of service, you will be allowed to purchase any remaining service up to 48 months. So let's say you had already ported 24 months. You can purchase an additional 24 months. That's covered under a different portion of our ordinance. So you will have to complete the form again. So it will very likely go to the same area. It's just a different process internally. So in your case, I already know that you took the money out. So, but they'll just confirm it for you. So you'll send it to the same place. VRS can do it. Either your prior department or VRS can do it. In your case, I would start with VRS. It's a little simpler. Does someone?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Why do we have to withdraw our money from VRS? Talk about collective bargaining. Why is that a shall?
He's asking why you have to take your contributions out of VRS. You can't get credit for the same period of service in multiple plans. So it's just part of the way that it was collectively bargained.
The IRS rule.
Specifically, we're talking about portability, which is that's
I'm talking
encapsulated in
about
portability. And you're talking about
Right.
service purchase.
But you can't get credit for that. The only exception is military service. Because you can't withdraw military service, but in the ordinance and all portability agreements, you can't get credit in multiple systems for the same
Is
time.
that a law?
It's not a law in buyback. It's part of our ordinance that governs the system. Specifically says you can't get credit for service. The only exception is the military service, because you can't withdraw the military service. So any other buy-in, you can't buy into our system and keep service in another system.
So I guess
It's our ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's our ordinance that governs the plan. Yeah.
It's also pretty universally
Yeah.
accepted. So we do the same thing. Like we will verify service for other plans if people want to move it. And one of the primary things is the person eligible to receive a benefit. So that's not just Fairfax County. It is covered under our ordinance, but it is pretty,
PRS.
yeah, it's pretty universal across plans. Do you have any other questions?
Are you able to pay a lump sum at the beginning, make some payments, and then pay a lump sum at the end? Can you do both?
Yes. As long as you're not making principal payments throughout, because we're not a bank, so we don't have like loans set up the same way. So if you wanted to make a principal payment at the beginning, her question was, can you make a principal payment at the beginning, set up payments, and then pay at the end? Yes, you can. As long as you're not trying to make lump payments in the middle so that we can like recast it. That's not how it works under our system. So you could make a payment at the beginning to reduce the overall cost of the payments, and then maybe you don't want to continue paying the payments and you just want to pay it all off at once. You can, as long as it's paying it in full, or as long as you plan on terminating it after. Yeah, Dana. Yeah, so the question was, we will do a contract with the total service that you're eligible to purchase. If you don't want to purchase all of it, how do you know what the cost is per month? So roughly, you could divide the total based on the months that you're purchasing. It's not exactly that way because the way that the calculator works, but it'll give you a rough idea of that. If one of our members reaches out to us and says, I don't want to do the 48 months, I'm looking at 2 years, then we'll go ahead and give you a new contract with that, because we do want you to sign saying, yes, I intend to purchase this service. Yes, you can go ahead and take the deductions for my pay and so on and so forth. The question is, are the months whole months or partial months? It's whole months.
There's an online question. Can I make a payment through deferred comp?
Yes. Yes, you can make a payment through deferred comp. Yes, Sam.
That's the majority.
Contingency plan if this isn't approved by the Board of Supervisors on May 21st.
Brad, that's a fantastic question. What happens if, what's the contingency plan if it's not approved on the 21st?
Until the board approves it, nothing we can do. So, yeah, that's as far as I know right now.
Will we be honored at our current salary rate if it goes past July 13th?
Repeat the question.
Will it be honored at the current salary rate if it goes past July 13th?
I think that hypothetical, since we haven't had a chance to talk to the county attorney or anybody else involved in the process, I'm not sure if that goes to the board of supervisors, if it's something that, gets pushed by your board of trustees. That's not a scenario we've come across. My understanding is that what is being presented to the board of supervisors is going to be approved, but until they actually do, what I mentioned.
Also, the entire purpose is to be cost neutral, so I guess we'll see what happens, but that is the whole purpose of it. Yeah.
What is the percentage? That the previous, let's say, our previous time on board with PRS.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the cost is so high is because the county wasn't contributing to the retirement system.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the percentage of Fairfax County is contributing into the retirement system?
The current employer contribution rate was not factored into the calculation, correct?
Repeat the question.
So the question was, what is the current employer contribution rate and how does that impact the calculation? It is not factored into the calculation.
Yeah, so Steve is asking about the employer contribution rate for 2023, 2024 too. For the county, it was over 50% for their contribution cost towards the budget, but that, like Stephanie said earlier, that rate, it doesn't matter if there's a deficiency in the funding, so to speak, or if the fund is fully funded. That does not impact the cost of the calculation for a service purchase.
I think there's actually, I don't know if you want to talk about the tank.
If we can get Fiona, if we can hear Fiona, she loves to talk about the tank.
Okay, I'm not an actuary, so I don't want to get too into the details because I'm sure I will not do it any justice, but
We can't hear her. I don't
Okay.
think.
There's a description on spreading out the cost and it's in the tank.
and
Yes.
sorry.
No, go ahead. The main thing is if you're gonna do this, the employee's gonna pay the full cost regardless of the contribution rate that the employer pays the fund, keep the fund fully funded or eventually, hopefully fully funded. So the same way with the uniform system, their contribution rate's different than with the police officer system. Their employees are also gonna pay 100% of the cost.
So theoretically, the system should be just as well funded before you purchase service and after you purchase service. There should be no change in the funding of the system.
But doesn't the county contribute to the system? So we are paying for the county's contribution.
Yes, that's on the service that you've already earned and what we anticipate you earning in the future.
With Fairfax County.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're contributing based on being employed by the county, not outside service.
But if I'm buying back for years,
Hmm?
I have to pay that.
Yes.
Okay, so it's
100% of the cost.
okay, so then the next question is that we have 172 vacancies, is the amount that I'm paying the extra for the county contribution, does that include the vacancies? That should be at today's.
They're two separate things though. So that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it truly, the employer contribution is not taken into account when it comes to the calculation. It's your benefit.
Yeah.
It's like Dana had asked earlier, is it possible to do something with someone starting at 20 years? I mean, we definitely can do that if you start at 20 years old, but I think what everybody wants to know is how much is it going to cost you? You know, so we're so close to that. I mean, we can definitely provide additional charts if you want to. But as soon as it's live and it's available through the Board of Supervisors, then we can just do the calculation for you. But it doesn't take into account what the employer contribution is. Your age, it's your plan, it's your salary, it's what we think your benefit will be, what it would change to if you did buy the service. So it doesn't have anything to do with vacancies or the employer contribution rate. It's purely based on what your benefit would be if you didn't buy it versus what it would be if you did buy it.
That's perfect. You're driving what?
Yes, ma'am.
With the calculation. Kind of on that step, you talk about in the FAQ number 7, which doesn't really make sense to me of like the impact. But essentially you're getting a 2.5% raise every single year for the length of service. This wasn't provided at all as an option for anyone sitting in this room when we were first hired. And we're kind of getting dug at where it was meant to be a bit of a retention and a bit of a like carrot for the people who are still here. And I can't tell you how many people in this room haven't seen a raise for God only knows how many years. So how is the calculation of a 2.25% raise coming up, which I'm sorry, if we get 2.25% the next 15 years, I'll stay way longer than my 25 because that number is going to be astronomical.
I'm not sure I can speak to raises that you're actually receiving. When we perform our experience study, which we do every 5 years and we will do again next year, we actually look at what raises you have been receiving historically when we go forward. When we do our evaluations, we assume that we're going to try to get closer to what you're actually receiving. So at the time that we performed our study in 2020, the assumption was that the excluding any merit increases, that year over year, you would be receiving on average a 2.25% raise.
But the last time the study was completed was 2020.
Yeah, terrible time to do an experience study. Yes. And yes, it's going to be tricky for us to do one next year because we have to somehow take into account, the pandemic threw everything off. So it will be interesting.
There's two questions on the computer. One person asked, they had missed the first part because of the link, and they said, what is the cost per year? And Stephanie just gave a nice broad example of that, which I said. And so the follow-up was, the answer would be to wait for the calculator, and that would give the total. But wait till they're eligible to ask for an estimate. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So you can use the cost estimates that Brad provided because we actually went through the calculator and we input all of these assumptions just to give you an idea of how it could change, how it would look for different people. So it'll give you a general idea. Is it an exact number? No, but we will be able to provide exact numbers as soon as it's approved. The calculator is ready, so it's ready to go as soon as it's actually part of our ordinance. So exact numbers will be forthcoming, but the chart can be used for now, just to give you an idea. Yes, ma'am.
Each year is not the same, and you can do it monthly. Initially, depending on the number of people requesting this, we're going to try to get the first calculation, assuming maximum service purchase. After they receive that, depending on, that was a question that we had. If somebody has 4 years, are they going to get 48 different calculations for each individual? We're going to get the first one out there. And then if somebody wants 20 calculations, internally, we have to figure out how to accommodate that.
Yeah, for example, just, the easiest way to look at it is if you have 4 years you can purchase, you get a cost for that 4 years. Divide that total cost by 48, and that gets you your monthly cost roughly. It's not going to exceed that because it's not going to be more greater cost, I believe. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way. So if you get the final cost, divide by however many total months of service you could purchase, and then multiply that by how many months you look to purchase. So if you wanted 10 or 20 or whatever, multiplied by that factor. So that's a broad way to do it, in utilizing the matrices of salary and the years of service. You can probably get close-ish, but yeah, I mean that'll work in the interim.
Any other questions?
There's one online asking whether it's per year or total.
The
The,
contract,
the estimates that we provided, those are for 4 years. So when we send you the cost through the contract, it'll be the total cost to purchase your maximum amount. And that'll depend because not everyone's gonna have 48 months.
the contract will break it down in months, total months. So if you had 3 years, it'll say 36 on the actual contract.
Yeah, so it'll be your maximum though. So like one person might have 24 months they're able to buy, one person could have 48 months. It'll give you the total cost. The contract will also break it down into like if you paid it as a lump sum versus if you spread it out over 104 biweekly pay periods, because of course the cost is higher than if you spread it out. Yes, sir.
Anything else besides this, it's got.
The question is on the back of the form, the verification of service credit, does it have to be filled out on the form or can we accept notarize? Is that what you're asking? Notarize verification? So at this point, we're requesting that you fill out the form. Like I mentioned, this is pretty standard. So we fill these out for other jurisdictions all the time. So hopefully you all won't come up with a lot of resistance in getting that completed. A lot of times, even just like the service purchase area or your employment verification, will pretty standardly know how to handle these. So
The only issue, if you, for example, that anybody might run into is, for example, their organization or the university or whatever the entity was that they're employed with before has gone, you know, out of business. So there could be mitigating circumstances, but as long as the employer's around, they still have that information. Information needs to come from them, somebody that's authorized to verify and swear to the accuracy and validity of that information.
any other questions? Yes, sir.
Did you have to be vested in your previous?
The question is, do you need to be vested in your previous plan? No, because don't max you can buy is 4 years anyways. That is portability. So if you were a member, like a new hire within the first 18 months, you have to be vested in your prior plan and have the contributions remaining. Those rules don't apply to this. It's a separate type of purchase.
And as long as you have no money in there.
Yes, as long as you have no money in there, that's what they're looking for.
Exception of military.
Exception of the military, yeah. Yeah, so in that case, it says on the back of the form, it certifies that you are or are not eligible for a benefit. So they would just say are not eligible for a benefit and would send it to us.
Repeat that.
Less than 4 years, not that.
Oh, his question, I was trying to remember exactly how I worded his question. I apologize. He was asking, he had a non-contributory plan prior to us and wasn't vested. He thought, how did they fill it out? They'll just certify that he is not eligible for a benefit from them. No, it's fine. Any other questions? Sir.
Would you guys be willing to accept like verification letters from, because like my previous department is 5 states away. And it's gonna be hard to walk into that building to get somebody to sign a form that looks like this one that it does. And so we got a verification letter saying that we have proof of prior employment and we're no longer a part of their retirement fund. Would that be enough for it?
The question is if you will accept a verification letter instead. So at this time, we're asking that you complete the form. You don't have to walk it into them if they're states away. You can just email it to them. You can fax it to them. We'll accept scanned copies. It does not have to be an original. We just want them to fill it out on our paperwork for now.
Another question.
Yes.
Online question says, if I have VRS time and bought my 4 years from the county, if I'm using my own money, I would not need to cash out my VRS. Can I leave that?
No, you can't. You have to take if it's VRS and it's not military, in which case you need to take the contributions out because you can't get credit in multiple plans for the same period of time. In that case, you might want to do portability first. So, and that's, some of these questions are going to be very specific to the individual because everyone's situation is so unique. So the email address isn't just for submitting the paperwork. If you have questions, you can also let us know there. Or if you're just a little nervous and asking in front of everybody. Yes, sir. He's asking what the turnaround time is, 30 days after May 21st at the earliest. Yeah. And we will use the date of so if it takes 30 days, let's say you submitted the application on July 1st, even if we don't do it until August 1st, we'll use the date that it was submitted. I know that's probably a big question for everybody with the increase that you'll be receiving. So it'll be calculated what your salary was when the application was received. The 30 days just allows Larry and I time to actually process it in addition to normal payroll and everything else.
Another online question. If everyone eligible bought back their time as soon as it was approved, let's say June, would that decrease the lump sum amount that the county has allocated for contribution to PORS in the fiscal year 25 budget?
No effect at all.
No. No, it wouldn't impact it whatsoever.
They're not related.
Other questions? Yes.
Table are we supposed to use? I know one says including COLA and the other says excluding COLA. I'm just trying to understand which side.
Yeah, it's present value.
I cannot answer the present value question.
I believe there's another. Is it just they are asking which table of factors with COLA or without COLA should be used in determining their own calculation. But I believe that in addition to this, there should be there should be a listing of how to perform the calculation for yourself. So you are going to need to use both of these. Assuming you're numbers people, there's a lot of numbers here. Yes, so there's a calculation process for full cost past service. Looks like 2 pages. And it will go through which factor applies to which part of the benefit when you're performing the calculation.
Any other questions? Any questions online?
One question. Another question online. Once we submit the request to you by email after May 21st, will we be able to get an appointment and sit down to work out all this to make an informed decision before the July 12th deadline?
Okay, so the July 12th deadline, I think we're talking about different things there. Once we give you the calculation, you actually have 60 days. So depending on once you receive it, let's say you got it on June 1st, you'd have until August 1st. We do have walk-ins. So if you wanted to come in, I handle walk-ins on Thursdays between 11 and 2. Larry handles walk-ins on Tuesdays between 11 and 2. You can always call us as well. So we can hop on a Teams call or we can discuss over the phone. So we'll be available to answer questions about the contracts for you specifically.
Monday through Friday.
Yeah, we have walk-ins Monday through Friday from 11 to 2. Just Larry and I are the ones that are primarily handling all the calculations.
Is the date of the contract in the year of service? But what date will actually the year of service credit be applied? Repeat the question.
Thank you. The question is, when will the years of service be applied? So at the completion of the contract. So, or once you terminate the contract because you are eligible for partial service. So That's very similar to how it is now. You get credit once everything is done. The only difference is with this one, you do get partial credit. Okay. More questions?
Thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions in the future, please reach out to us, whichever is most convenient to you. Like I said, all this information will be provided on our website later this week. So if anybody wasn't here or didn't take something with them, it'll be accessible there. And we look forward to getting the recording from this session up there as well. So if anybody was not able to attend.
Yeah.
Like a global PDF for that.
Thank you.
It'll be a printout of the form.
Something we can send to
Yeah,
another.
we might be able to get a
Yeah,
editable PDF website, but can't promise that.
police and fire have still have steps and
Thank you.
we have the market adjustment plus the steps.